Okay, so you mentioned well-being optimization, which is something that I think is the right frame, but also dangerous because
Mm.
it's kind of what markets are in a way. It's like, well, what do you want? And we
Ah,
conflate that with well-being. And I think there's sort of a tendency in market optimization for sort of detachment from reality when you optimize just for want and don't have
oh yeah,
any bearings on like what actually is. So I want to talk about Civium in the context of well-being optimization and how it wouldn't have the effect of detaching people further and further from reality, I guess.
sure. So I think you bring up exactly the right um, frame, which is this notion of wants. And it's funny, I actually have two distinct people. One's oh gosh, Joe Edelman, and the other one's Forrest Landry, who both independently, as far as I know, uh, addressed the question of wants. So I'll probably end up using Forrest's language, but the way Joe described it was like people have, if we think about it from a want is a cognizable, meaning we actually have an image
Mm-hmm.
of a means of satisfying something.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So a Coke, I want a Coke, or I want a glass of water. Yeah. A need is the coalescence of a series of actual, I'm going to say underlying characteristics into something that can become a want. Right? So, for example, um, before I have this notion of I want a Coke, I have something which is prior to that, which I could say is I need hydration. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And a desire, and I'm just using these words as Forrest Landry describes them. So just for the moment, just have them be defined as such.
Mm-hmm.
The desire is the actual underlying complexity that gives rise to the specificity of the need. Right. So, for example, I have a inadequate amount of um, hydrogen ions, oxygen, water in my underlying metabolic system, and therefore I have a need for hydration, and therefore I name it as a want for a Coke. Notice that in that chain, the breakage of the linkage between the need and the want,
Mm-hmm.
I hope you understand that a Coke is not an adequate way, a good way to hydrate, is where most of the trouble lies. Although not all of it. Okay. Now, so when we speak about well being, we're actually speaking about something that is operating from the point of view of meta, or more specifically from the point of view of um, second order. So the way that I've defined it in the past is that you have fulfillment and then you have well being. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Fulfillment is the degree to which the thing that you want actually meets your needs and fulfills your desires, and you accomplish it. Okay, so to have fulfillment is to actually produce something which actually meets your needs, i.e., you recognize it as doing the thing, and it really does. Right? It actually solves the underlying characteristic in reality that is giving rise to the need.
Mm-hmm.
Well-being has to do with the degree to which your fulfillment provides an upgradient in your capacity to achieve fulfillment across a larger scope of possibility and over time. And so then, as we begin to talk about well-being, we start talking about things like, as it turns out, sort of intrinsically, synergy between and among is intrinsic in well-being. And so various forms of defection behavior can achieve fulfillment, but they cannot achieve well-being, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an intrinsic when you're orienting towards well-being, which leads you towards this whole story, this kind of that mode of uh, holism and holistic,
Mm-hmm.
because you need to start being able to take into account second order effects
Mm-hmm.
in each specific fulfillment. that you are orienting towards.
Mhm.